Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. My mistake. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump in here and be with us today. Really excited for our webinar today. We're all always excited about our webinars, but especially today, we're going to be looking at the topic from moving from a pathological to a constructional approach in PBS. And we'll introduce my amazing learned colleagues shortly. But first, I just want to do a quick welcome to country and just acknowledge the land, sea and skies that we all enjoy, belonging to the First Nations peoples of Australia. I'm currently on Bundjalung Nation, and Helder is in Gadigal country, and Helder is our head of educational technology, and he's got some exciting news to share before we kick off.
Hi, Tracy. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today with two big stars in the field of PBS, John and Oliver, great practitioners, wonderful scientists, helping a lot everyone to work in the field. We should truly pay attention to what they are coming to say for us today about the constructional approach. Today, I have a short announcement to do, is that we have on Friday a beautiful workshop, a full day on this Friday about restrictive practices, how to fade, how to eliminate, or how to reduce restrictive practices that put limits for people's freedom and dignity. So we have a lot of information in our website, pbstogether.com.au/fadingrp. You can go directly there for more information. And what is pretty exciting is that today we are going to raffle a free access for this workshop for one practitioner here in the audience. You just need to share your name and location in the chat, and at the end of the session, we are going to raffle the free access to the workshop.
Thanks, Helder. Super excited. And it's a really popular workshop. We've ran this workshop a few times now, and we are booked out, but we do want to offer one free space for someone here today, just as our appreciation to show how we value your time in joining us today. So I'm going to introduce today. So as I said, we're going to be looking at the topic from moving from a pathological to a constructional approach in PBS. So we've got two co-presenters today, John Wooderson and Oliver Roschke. And so we really appreciate their time. And this is a passion of theirs. Many of you might have seen them present at previous conferences on this topic. They're really passionate about it, and for good reason. If you haven't had the privilege of seeing them speak on this previously, you are in for a treat today, and you'll really have something to really consider and that will clinically change your practice. And so super excited. Oliver Roschke is a BCBA and been working in PBS for 20 years, and John Wooderson has just finished his PhD, so congratulations, John. And he's been working in PBS for around 15 years. So they're going to highlight the importance of that therapeutic contract and explain the difference between participant-focused and provider-focused PBS, and share some really compelling case studies as well. So welcome to you both. Don't forget to put all your questions in the comments, because Helder will be looking at and monitoring those questions and popping some of those up along the bottom as we go. So put your name and where you're from in the comment. Don't miss out on winning a free ticket to our workshop. And over to you, Oliver and John. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Well, hello to all of you. It's lovely to be talking with you today, and lovely to be here again with my wonderful colleague, Oliver. Let's get going. So as Tracy was saying, we'd like to pay respects to the traditional owners of this and custodians of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land and waters. I'd like to thank them for protecting this land and its ecosystems since time immemorial. So during our presentation today, we'd like to identify the core features and key differences between pathological and constructional approaches to positive behaviour support. We'll also be discussing some constructional strategies to assist participants to achieve valued lifestyle outcomes, and at the same time addressing restrictive practices. Much of our own work in today's presentation is based on the constructional approach developed by Israel Gold-Diamond. Gold-Diamond was a true pioneer in the ethics of behaviour change and also the rights of people with disabilities. Long before the emergence of PBS in the 80s, Gold-Diamond posed a deceptively simple yet really profound set of questions to help guide us with intervention programs. And these are: where do you want to go? Where are you now? How will you get there? And what will keep you going? So we'd like you to consider that these aren't simply or only questions for the individuals that we provide behaviour support to. They also present an invitation for each of us to thoughtfully examine our practices and to specify the changes that we would like to see, and also to help formulate the means by which we continue to move our field toward more truly human rights-based practice. As a starting point, we'd like to revisit the beginnings of positive behaviour support. So when we look back, it's clear to us that PBS emerged as a response to widespread use of coercive and punishment-based interventions for people with disabilities. Truly horrible things like electric shock and other abusive practices. Then, as we start to see public concern grow, it was the early PBS pioneers who began to advocate for more humane and socially acceptable approaches. And this included a genuine commitment to human rights, as well as supporting individuals in leading meaningful and self-directed lives. Now, keep in mind that at that time, reducing challenging behaviour was really a secondary aim, and primarily when it interfered with a person's ability to pursue their goals or overall quality of life. Interestingly, though, when we look back at the evidence over the past 30 to 40 years of PBS research, we can see some positive outcomes. So we can see that PBS consistently produces reductions in challenging behaviour. But, and this is quite a problem, its broader impact on quality of life remains limited at best. And this raises some quite serious concerns about its overall effectiveness. And when we look more recently, we see growing concerns about the implementation of PBS under the NDIS. And there are many that argue that PBS is mainly used as a regulatory mechanism for restrictive practices, and that it's become conflated with and woven tightly into the laws that regulate restrictive practices. And then this emphasis on reporting and compliance, unfortunately, often overshadows the importance of person-centered approaches to PBS. So as an example, Brent Hayward and colleagues, some wonderful Australian researchers, they contend that current PBS policy really functions as an informal rulebook for the use of restrictive practices. And then this positions PBS as both the justification for restraint as well as the supposed solution. Furthermore, we know ourselves that the law states quite clearly that restraint must be time limited and only used as a last resort. However, researchers like Richardson found that many individuals remain subject to restrictive practices for 3 years or even longer after their initial use. And this is even more troubling when you consider the limited evidence that PBS actually reduces restrictive practice, or that reducing behaviours of concern, which is primarily the target of PBS, results in fewer restrictive practices. So now that we've been a bit of a downer about the state of PBS in Australia, what do we think is the way forward? How do we suggest resolving the ongoing use of restrictive practices, while at the same time ensuring PBS is genuinely effective in supporting people with disability to achieve their own valued lifestyle outcomes? And so that leads to the critical question that we're aiming to explore today, and that is, what changes are needed to shift our focus away from behaviours of concern and the use of restrictive practices so that PBS in Australia can once again prioritise improving the quality of life of people with disabilities? Well, we propose that addressing these issues requires a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of continuing to rely on the dominant pathological view of behaviour, our field needs to move toward more constructional forms of intervention. And for us to help explain why this shift matters, we thought it'd be helpful to compare the two approaches directly. So starting with the pathological approach first, it treats challenging behaviour and restrictive practices as maladaptive, as if they were symptoms of something wrong within the person that must be fixed or eliminated. In this pathological approach, success is usually measured by how much the behaviour or the practice is reduced. Gold Diamond's constructional approach, on the other hand, offers a very different perspective, one that's strength-based from the outset. And the constructional approach recognises that all behaviour is adaptive, and it's a rational response to the person's circumstances. It's shaped by their learning history, as well as the surrounding environment. So with the constructional approach, the desired outcome for the individual isn't just the elimination of challenging behaviour, but rather an increase in their opportunities as well as the choices available to them to pursue the life that they would prefer. Now, if we think about organisations and staff, constructional goals typically involve creating a safe and empowering work environment that supports the basic human rights of both staff and participants. And the constructional approach starts by identifying the strengths, the aspirations of the individuals, as well as the broader context that shapes behaviour. Constructional interventions are co-designed with those involved, and they're guided by a shared therapeutic agreement. And that agreement includes ongoing confirmation of assent. It also builds on existing strengths and capacities. And when we measure progress, we see that it's maintained through the meaningful outcomes that it helps to achieve. Now, in the next few slides, Oliver will showcase a case study that highlights the different outcomes that each approach can produce.
Okie dokie. So now just to bring these two different paradigms to life and to explore their practical implications, I'm going to walk you through a case study we've titled The Tale of Two Practitioners. You'll meet the participant and you'll be able to observe how two different practitioners approach his support. Before we begin, we want to emphasize that the purpose of the presentation is not necessarily to criticize any particular practices, because as practitioners ourselves, we understand that the settings and the systems we work within can have a profound impact on how we will deliver behavior support. We also recognize that at times, eliminative or pathological strategies may be necessary in the short term to ensure safety or to meet urgent support needs. Our primary focus here is really to offer a clear contrast between these two approaches, not to judge, but to highlight the key differences between these orientations and the outcomes they can produce. By doing so, we also hope to illustrate what becomes possible if we're able to work in a truly constructional way, where the focus shifts from managing behaviors towards building meaningful person-led lives. Okay, let's get into this, just trying to find the right buttons here. Okay, so let's meet the two practitioners of our story. We've got pathological Pat, a well-meaning professional following a pathologically oriented approach to positive behavior support. And we've got Constructional Connie, who uses construction principles and is focused on supporting participants to identify and achieve outcomes that are meaningful to them. And this is Sam. He is 27 years old, lives in a supported independent living home with 3 other people, and has an intellectual disability. Sam has been referred to behavior support because he reportedly engages in aggressive behaviors, especially around food and meal times. This includes taking food from others, as well as having loud and physically aggressive outbursts. To manage these challenges, staff presently use mealtime rules, timeouts from the meal table, as well as PRN medication for acute agitation, including the occasional physical blocking to ensure the safety of other participants. So in our opening scene, Pat and Connie have just arrived at the Sill home for their intake interviews. The environment is tense. Staff are eager for answers and are hoping for strategies that will stop the aggression quickly. Both practitioners are here to help, but they approach the situation from very different starting points. Pat starts by conducting a functional behavior assessment interview with staff to figure out the likely triggers and consequences of aggression. He wants to know what's driving these incidents and why they may be happening. Then Pat reviews and analyzes relevant documentation, incident logs, progress notes, existing PRN protocols, and any other allied health reports that are available. Pat's priority is to reduce aggression as quickly as possible. At the same time, he must make sure that any restrictive practice protocols currently in place meet legislative requirements. Once that's confirmed, those protocols can be added to the interim behavior support plan. So let's have a look at how Connie approaches the situation. Connie, on the other hand, starts her intake by speaking directly with Sam. She remembers that a construction approach considers behavior change programs as social contracts, mutually agreed upon by consenting parties. Therefore, she wants to understand Sam's goals and aspirations at the onset of services, not just the challenges, but what a good life looks like from Sam's point of view. Connie is actively looking for Sam's existing strength, interests, and the relationships he has to build from. For example, she notices that Sam has an interest in food and cooking and clear food preferences. Connie asks open-ended questions to get his perspective. What does your ideal mealtime look like, Sam? Who would be there? What would you eat? If anything were possible, what would you want to do? Rather than focusing on the problems, Connie follows the construction model and starts by exploring Sam's goals related to his own interests. So this approach of co-designing the plan together with Sam by focusing on his desired outcomes leads to important insights. Connie finds out that Sam really doesn't like it when foods are mixed on his plate. So they write down exactly how he'd like his meal served by giving him some level of control and predictability. Sam also shares that he would prefer to cook his own meals and doesn't always want to eat with the group. He's not saying that he wants to be alone though. He's happy to join the group meals on a few days, but on other days he would prefer to eat on his own, or maybe with a staff member or a single participant when the group is finished. As they dive deeper into what Sam would be doing if the program was successful, he lights up at the idea of inviting friends over and cooking for them. Sam brings also the idea of eating out from time to time. So Connie really leans into Sam's vision for recognizing Sam's vision for what he wants his life to look like, what his goals are. So she encourages him to think about learning to cook with the support of staff, and when he's ready, possibly hosting a meal with a significant other. Connie's perspective is, we can dream big, Sam. What you would like your life to look like is what we can work toward. So let's take a look at how Pat approaches the situation. So in contrast, this is what Pat comes up with following a pathological model. Pat and the support team decide to develop a reward chart that is focused on emotion regulation. The idea is, if Sam can stay calm and relaxed at the table for each meal across the next 4 weeks, he will have shown that he can manage his emotions, and it is safe to invite a friend over for dinner. Pat also puts together a safety plan specifically for mealtimes. This includes PRN chemical restraint protocol only to be used if Sam escalates and other strategies don't work. To help Sam manage these situations, Pat teaches him how to express when he's angry and to ask for break when things get too much at the table. Pat also sets up regular monitoring of Sam's mood and behavior during mealtimes so they can track progress towards those behavior reduction goals. So, following a few months of behavior support plan implementation, Sam's data look better, and he's improved under both approaches, but in different ways. Here's how his behavior support practitioners decide to proceed. Guided by a construction approach to behavior support, Connie continues to support Sam to follow his goals and aspirations. She believes that hosting a dinner will be a powerful motivator for Sam. He clearly takes pride in his cooking for others, and this gives him purpose. Connie considers the importance of achievable steps towards desired outcomes in the construction approach, and suggests that they start making a guest list and planning a menu for the big event. In the meantime, she proposes another small step to ensure Sam is successful, inviting a few more people for Sunday dinner and building it up from there. Connie also works with the staff team to build other relevant repertoires, such as setting the table, welcoming guests, and planning meals, so that Sam feels confident and supported. So let's take a look. So, with Connie and support staff support, Sam starts hosting a small dinner. Staff are nervous at first. There's tension and concerns about sudden escalations, but the dinner goes smoothly without any major concerns. Sam cooks happily, chats with his friends, and for the first time, he experiences genuine autonomy. As his confidence grows, Sam begins cooking for the whole house once a week and expresses interest in helping with the grocery shopping. The other residents and staff are surprised and impressed by the quality of his meals. As a result, mealtimes generally become more relaxed social experiences for Sam. Even when things don't go to plan and staff are not available to eat with him on his scheduled days, he starts shrugging it off, saying, "It's okay, my friends are coming over on the weekend anyways." And then something else emerges. Sam starts talking about a bigger dream. He wants to become a chef and work at a restaurant. Now back to Pat, who responds to Sam's achievements with polite caution. He thinks hosting a big dinner is risky, and his reservation is supported by the staff team, who are also worried about the impact on other participants. Pat therefore suggests focusing on maintaining stable low rates of aggressive behaviors for a bit longer before making any bigger changes. If he can get through another month without incidents, maybe we can think about inviting a few more people over for dinner or a barbecue at the park. But first, we need to focus on emotion regulation and taking breaks when things get too much. Pat isn't really trying to shut Sam down, but he's very. He is trying to manage staff expectations and doesn't want to risk an escalation that could undo the progress they've made so far or trigger new restrictions being put in place. For Pat, safety and managing behaviors come first. So, another few months in, and Pat's plan delivers what the system asked for. Specifically, reductions in aggressive behaviors and authorization of restrictive practices in line with legislative requirements. Staff rarely deviate from established protocols and consider this a success. Things are calm, there are only a few minor incidents, and they've not needed PRN medication for some time, as well as the direct support ratios during the meals are decreasing. Pat is also on track with his fade-out plan for PRN medication. If the chemical restraint is not used during a crisis over the next 6 consecutive months, he will initiate a conversation with a psychiatrist about fading it. But Sam never really gets invested in mealtimes or cooking. On the positive side, he doesn't escalate anymore, but he also doesn't thrive. He hasn't developed new skills, and most nights he just asks for a break and then eats alone in his room in front of the TV. Pat cares, but he finds it hard to shift course. The system in which he works makes it difficult to pivot away from the pathological risk-managed approach. So with Connie and the staff support, sorry, I have the wrong slide. Here we go. So as we've seen through these contrasting approaches taken by both Pat and Connie, the path a practitioner chooses can have a significant impact on a participant's experience, their autonomy, and ultimately their quality of life. Pat's approach, while well-intended and aligned with restrictive practice legislation, unintentionally limits Sam's aspirations and opportunities for growth. In contrast, Connie's construction approach starts with Sam's aspirations and builds on his strength, supporting him to achieve his goals and creating new possibilities for more fulfilling life. However, what is important for us to recognize is, despite the clear benefits and success of Connie's construction intervention, this approach raises a real dilemma for practitioners. How can they work towards goals that truly matter to the participant, while also addressing restrictive practices? We strongly believe that they cannot do both effectively within the current system. The current system is failing both participants and practitioners because it conflates positive behavior support with restrictive practice legislation. In Sam's case, Connie fully supported him in pursuing his own goals. Yet under current NDIS legislation, both the practitioner and the supported independent living provider may still be considered non-compliant and face penalties for the ongoing use of unauthorized restrictive practices. At the same time, when practitioners like Pat devote their time and resources to ensuring compliance with restrictive practice rules and managing behaviors, it drains the participants' funding and shifts the attention away from helping people achieve meaningful lifestyle outcomes. So, and also to be clear, we are not suggesting that restrictive practices should be ignored, but rather we believe that the current approach taken by our field is misguided, overly focused on pathology and compliance, and therefore largely ineffective for the people we serve. As mentioned earlier by John, we see the solution in adopting a construction approach. And in the next few slides, I'll briefly shift our focus to how construction approaches can be used to address restrictive practices at the level of the implementing provider. In doing so, and in line with Goldman's indications, we first need to identify whose behaviors actually need to change when addressing restrictive practices and for what purpose. Caselli and Grates remind us that restrictive practices are the actions of people other than those who display behaviors of concern. Therefore, understanding the drivers of the behaviors of those who implement restrictive practices needs to be an important focus of any initiative to reduce them. This point is really worth repeating. Restrictive practices are the actions of people other than those who display risk behaviors. In other words, restrictive practices are not the participant's behavior. They are the risk behaviors of the individuals implementing these restrictions. In most cases, support workers and organizations who employ them. Therefore, any behavior change program at addressing restrictive practices must work directly with the organization, their staff, or other implementers as the primary recipient of PBS. So remember that the construction approach at any level always begins by asking what the desired outcomes are for those receiving behavior change services. And the answer is never simply the elimination of anything. So it is also not the elimination of restrictive practices or the management of risk behaviors. We need to consider what are the benefits that staff and other implementers experience when using restrictive practices, as this reveals the desired outcomes. Think about it as a functional behavior assessment of implementer behavior. We believe that most staff want a working environment that is safe. They want to feel confident that they can meet their duty of care and the participants' needs. They also want to know that they can protect the physical integrity of the people they support, themselves or anyone else who may be at risk of harm. Additionally, most staff we worked with value a close and trusting relationship with the people they support. Just as importantly, organizations who use restrictive practices must meet their obligation under workplace health and safety legislation, human rights legislation, and civil and criminal law. So this is by no means an exhaustive list of desired outcomes, and these commonly differ across individual organizations and staff. But what we are hoping to illustrate here is that these are all valid and reasonable goals to be accomplished. And what we believe these outcomes help us understand is that the staff use of restrictive practices in many ways is a reasonable and rational response. In behavioral terms, it's both adaptive and lawful, given the demands of maintaining safety and meeting legal obligations. We strongly believe that most supports genuinely value their relationship with participants, and they are aware that restrictive practices can damage therapeutic rapport that they work so hard to establish. Most importantly, less importantly, my phone is ringing, apologies. Okay, so yeah, this was not very good time. Anyways, so just to recap, we really believe that most supports generally value their relationship with the participants and that they are aware restrictive practices can damage the therapeutic rapport that they work so hard to establish. And most importantly, restrictive practices infringe on participants' human rights. So while these measures might be effective in the short term, they often come at a significant personal and ethical cost. We need to recognize that staff behavior reflects a range of contextual factors such as their training, access to resources, the values of their organization, and the day-to-day contingencies they encounter. Understanding this context is therefore essential for effective intervention. Following Gold Diamond's indications, we need to ask what alternative repertoires need to be established, the absence of which makes the use of restrictive practices more likely. And the answer lies in developing non-coercive ways for staff to create safe working environments to fulfill their duty of care, all while upholding human rights of those they support. This is our desired outcome and the direction we want to pursue. So once we're clear on the outcomes we want to work towards, the next question becomes, how do we get there? And if the goal is behavior change, then some form of therapeutic contract or agreement is required. But again, the question is, who should that contract be with if our aim is to change staff and organizational behavior? Gold Diamond was very clear on this point and argued that if the aim is to change someone's behavior, then the contract must be made directly with that person and align with their goals and aspirations. For example, when parents came to Gold Diamond with concerns about their child, he did not agree to change the child's behavior on their behalf. Instead, he would work with the parents to help them change their own behavior so they could better support their relationship with their child. If he did work directly with the child, it was only after forming a separate agreement with the child, one that was based on the child's own goals. So building on this idea, let's consider what this would look like in the context of behavior support practitioners working with organizations and staff who implement restrictive practices. If a provider or any stakeholder is concerned about a participant and comes to see a behavioral support practitioner, then the contract should be with them to help change their behavior, so they can improve their relationships and supports for the participant. This means that we must begin by developing a separate formal agreement with both the organization leadership and their staff. Without this clear and mutual understanding, we are essentially asking people to change without their consent and commitment. For change to be meaningful and lasting, and to truly address the ongoing use of restrictive practices, we need active participation and buy-in from all staff and their management from the onset of services. Of course, we also recognize that this raises the question whether the participants' behavior support funding should actually be used to provide behavior change programs for organizations and their staff. However, this is another barrel of worms beyond the scope of this webinar. So just to close the circle, let's have a look what this gold diamond quote would look like in the context of our work with the participant. When working with the participant, then, we should make an effort to contract with them separately to fulfill their goals and aspirations. So what John and I are really proposing us to start exploring is two distinct but interconnected outputs. A safety and support plan that is aimed to understand the behaviors and desired outcomes for the implementing provider towards more human rights-based, less restrictive provision of supports, and then a lifestyle plan for the participant that is really focused on helping them achieve the goals that matter most. So let's now take a brief look at what the proposed approach to working with organizations could look like for our previous case example of Sam, whose provider was very convinced that Sam's behavior had to change and that restrictive practices were necessary to keep him and others safe. So as you can see, these pathological goals of the implementer, with a strong focus on reducing and managing behaviors, can have a significant impact on how staff approach SAM supports, including what I believe who needs to change and what data they collect to evaluate progress. If we as behavior support practitioners now change our approach and start by establishing clear construction goals with that organization and its staff at the onset of services, we may find that this can really shift their perspective and their approach to supporting SAM. So, and again, as I said before, here it is really important that staff and leadership work together to establish shared goals that prioritize safety and quality of life outcomes for the people they support. Our role as a behavior support practitioner here is really to explore the critical question, assuming you're successful as an implementing provider, what are the positive outcomes you would be able to observe for your service users and staff? And as you can see, this shift in the focus towards clearly kind of observable construction goals can really have a significant impact how we then approach subsequent assessment and behavioral interventions within an organization. So our focus then shifts, rather than focusing on when risk behaviors to occur, towards exploring under what circumstances those behaviors are not of concern. And what are the organizational strengths and resources that are already available to promote success in order to identify alternative, non-restrictive solutions? And this then often leads us to develop new programs that really focus on teaching staff relevant skills to better support participants and to facilitate increasing access to valued activities rather than reducing them or implementing further restrictions. And what we find is that often many providers have not explored less restrictive options, but they may be open to try these first. And in other cases, less restrictive strategies by staff can become a condition for the endorsement of restrictive practices as part of the fade-out plan. and to sustain progress and to ensure timely changes in programs where required, regular reviews with the staff team and the management are essential, as these offer staff the opportunity to celebrate success. And this success can become an important reinforcer for the staff team rather than just focusing on ongoing behavior reduction as the primary source for motivation. Okay. Yes, so I hope that this brief example helps illustrate how shifting our approach from a pathological risk management behavior reduction approach can really shift the perspective of the provider and the strategies they then use to support the participant. All right, over to John.
Thanks, Oliver. So just a quick recap before we finish up. So we've said that PBS began as a movement away from coercion. And this movement was focused on building meaningful lives. 40 years on, though, or roughly 40 years on, we need to face the uncomfortable truth that as it's practiced today, PBS rarely delivers on that promise. Instead, it's become bound up with the regulation of restrictive practices. But keep in mind, as we've said earlier, that restrictive practices are not participant behaviour. They're the behaviour of staff and organisations. But somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of who should be at the centre of our behaviour change programs. Success should not be measured by compliance or behaviour reduction alone, but rather the outcomes that matter. Things like dignity, autonomy, and quality of life. So if we're truly serious about addressing restrictive practices, then we must focus on staff and organisational behaviour. And to do that, we need to look at creating environments that are safe, supportive, and free from coercion. And finally, hopefully this comes across with full sincerity. I want to encourage you all to consider that reform does not wait for policy, but rather it begins with practice. So each of us here today, in our daily work, we can choose to apply the constructional approach. And that is to build from strengths, to shape environments, and to pursue outcomes that truly matter. Please keep in mind that even small shifts, when repeated across our field, that they can become systemic change, because they reshape not only the lives of the people that we support, but the very systems that govern our work. And if PBS is to live up to its promise, then it must return to its roots. That is, as a movement for building lives of dignity, freedom, and meaning. And that, our friends, that work begins with us. So thank you all today for your time and attention. If you are interested in continuing this conversation, we're going to be having some questions, but also if you'd like to reach out to us, there's a QR code on the screen that you can contact us through, leave your contact details, or alternatively, reach out directly through the email addresses on the screen, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Thank you so much, John and Oliver. And thank you, everyone. We have more than 100 practitioners here today with us. Let me bring the questions from the audience here, and everybody has the opportunity now to write your question in the chat, and then Oliver and John will be here to answer for you. Let me bring the first one here. This is similar to Ross Green, collaborative and proactive solutions, true involvement with the participants. What do they need? Are you familiar with Ross Green solutions, comments?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take that as a comment more than anything, but I wholeheartedly agree. I'm a big fan of Ross Green's collaborative and proactive solutions. And this idea, I think he says in one of the books that I've read, that really behavioral problems are downstream from the real problems for kids within classrooms. There's this there's this gap that needs to be addressed, the gap between the expectations within the environment and the child's capability, their repertoire to succeed and meet those expectations. So closing that gap allows for that young person to succeed. I think it's true with the adults that we work with as well. There's some fantastic talk recently in published research around addressing environments of concern. So I think a greater focus on the contextual problems that we're trying to address rather than the behavior alone, I think will be pretty successful.
Great. Second here, Anika said, how do we handle the provider anxiety around the shift as they are really looking for the risk management? Any tips? Great question.
Yeah, I can share some thoughts, and John, please feel free to comment as well. Yeah, I think, from my experience working with providers, the anxiety is often a product of, maybe not seeing the alternatives available to them to safely support the person, or sometimes also not having the necessary resources and skills to safely support that person. Right. And I think those kind of anxious behaviors, they often subside almost like as a side effect, right, of us really helping the provider to articulate clear goals and setting up clear plans, right, that help them to more effectively support that person. And in a way, like, anxiety is a signal we should take serious, right, because it is the provider telling us, look, we're not quite ready for this shift. Right. And so I think it is due to us to explore with the provider, okay, what is the first approximation you're willing to take, right? What is the first baby step, right, that we can take, to support this person through less restrictive means in that way? So you can really see the dynamic is very similar to working with the participants themselves, where we have to kind of conduct a very careful contextual assessment and look for the provider's strength and for their goals, right, to achieve those outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where Gold Diamond's constructional approach is very powerful within these particular needs as well. And it starts with, well, what is the desired outcome? As we suggested earlier in our presentation, the outcome of a safe work environment is an entirely valid outcome for any organization. But it's just about, well, what are the alternatives available to the organization that don't require coercive or restrictive means to achieve that outcome? And so the work of the behavior support practitioner is to come in and help work towards those particular outcomes.
Great. We have a comment here that it was a great chat, refreshing. One more question here from Angela. Quite often, there is a bias around children in the previous behavior. This makes working with schools and moving forward difficult when we work with the constructional approach.
Yeah, it's sad at times how young children can have these reputations as difficult, challenging individuals, when we know that they're entirely shaped by their learning histories and the behavior and the environments around them. And I think, again, Gold Diamond points to this, right? There is no maladaptive behavior. The problems that we see, they're entirely adaptive responses to challenging environments. And if you start to reframe that understanding of that child as struggling or not coping or able to be more successful given the right supports, you start to reframe the understanding of who they are and the behavior that they engage in.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And maybe just to briefly kind of comment on that as well. I think one of the challenges we often see is that when referrals come through the provider and the school, they really want us to focus on addressing the problem in the problem context, right? But it is so often the hardest place to be, right? For the child, for the teacher. So I think as part of the constructional approach, also our assessment really carefully considers, where's the child already successful? Where does the child have positive child-teacher interactions. And often those can be the environments where we can then really zoom in and build strength and kind of shape new repertoires, right, for both the child and the teacher. So I think this is something that's really part of the important shift here, right, to really look at, okay, where are areas where some success is already occurring, and can we zoom in there to really build from that existing strength?
Amazing. We have a comment here from the previous question. Once again, building relationships based on trust so that the environment is willing to make changes. To conclude the first question that we discussed here, and we have one more here. Do you have examples of constructional approach when working with people who do not communicate using verbal language and may have profound cognitive impairment, so may not be able to identify goals? Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit limited in terms of sharing specific details about clients that we worked with, but I can think of several examples. There was one man that I worked with in his 50s, not a great communicative repertoire. So I couldn't sit down with him directly and then ask him, well, what are your desired outcomes? But instead, in looking at what I was referred to address, so that was behavior of concern, when he was returning home from community access, it became pretty clear what he was wanting. And then looking back at his history where previous independent access to the community was completely shut off because there was concerns about his road safety skills, then the program became pretty evident to me. It was reinstating, developing those road safety skills so that he could once again access the community independently. So I think a lot of the times our clients are telling us a lot. We just need to listen carefully about what they're telling us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And again, right, I think this is where the contextual analysis comes in as well, right? Because the assumption, what Golddiamond calls a competent operant is we've got an individual here that engages in pretty severe and pretty risky behaviors, right? So I think our assumption should really be at all times there's something that is really important and of value to them occurring right in this environment. And I think part of that exploration is really to collect data on, what outcomes does the behavior produce? What alternatives do they currently have available to them? Do they have the necessary skills to navigate right the environment in which they're currently struggling? So I think all of those can really help us to start kind of pinpointing goals. And something we'll probably not be able to dive in deeper today is Golddiamond actually developed something that's called event logs, that we find personally very, very useful with working with participants that do not have the necessary language repertoires, but it allows us to track their behavior and their emotions across the day to identify, are there any activities and places that they seem to enjoy more than others? And is there any kind of thing we can do to increase their access to environments in which they are happy and fulfilled?
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Let me ask one question too. If I want to dive deep into the constructional approach to PBS, do you guys recommend any book or specific article where I can start?
Did you want to suggest some, Oliver?
So if you scan the QR code, we are very happy to bombard you with a reading list. Oh yeah, thanks, Heidel. So that's probably the easiest way to just get in touch. And John and I, we've got a whole list of resources that we can share with you. There is the Constructional approach website. If you type in into your Google search the Constructional approach, that's an American-based website, and that will give you like a whole range of resources, podcast episodes, book recommendations, research papers. So I think those would probably be some of the pieces of information that are worth checking out.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. We have also two more comments here. Let's see quick. Donna said, since starting a master's of ABA and participating in webinars such as this, I have completely changed the way I train. focus is on risk mitigation as well as changing bias, opinions, and perceptions. And Nick also said, I do believe we need a legislative shift in the kind of power we hold in being able to help shift perspectives, as providers not having the best interest at heart is an issue. All right. We are running out of time. Thank you so much, Oliver and John, for being here with us today. There is a lot of food for thought. It's beautiful, the change from a pathological to a constructional approach, and it's really consistent with the whole history of PBS, why we are here, what we are trying to do when we support people around the world. So thank you so much. We have 1 minute for last comments. If you guys want to say anything else before we raffle the ticket for the workshop that we are going to run this Friday. John, Oliver?
Well, just once again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to you, Helder and Tracy, for the opportunity to come and talk today. I think both Oliver and I recognize that we're really just trying to continue this wonderful tradition within our science and within our field around construction approaches. Unfortunately, it's not as well known as it should be, even though it's been around for many, many decades. But I think from my own perspective, I see lots of really committed, energetic practitioners doing these things, but not always necessarily, out in full view, more under the radar, trying to sneak in constructional approaches to the work that they do. So just keep it up. I think there are some wonderful practitioners in our field.
Thank you so much.
And I think that, history has told us that it was really a lot of parents that were the greatest advocates to shift PBS and all those aversive approaches that were, back in the day. And so again, it's those small shifts, as you both said, we can all take those small steps toward that change and take those small steps and shifts toward changing our practice toward a constructional approach and really, I guess, challenging the NDIS's correlation for our roles between, one foot in, trying to increase someone's quality of life and the other foot in trying to be restrictive practice police. It's challenging. And I think that we need to, join together and focus on the right things for the right reasons, and we're great at that. We've got an amazing thousands and thousands of practitioners in Australia that are strong enough to make those small shifts. So I think we just keep the conversation going and make those small shifts in our own individual practice. So thank you both so very much.
Yeah, and now it's time to raffle a book. Let's do it. I know
this
that
is Hilda's favorite thing to do is to raffle things. Like, he gets so excited. He's like a host, a show host like guy.
Yeah, it's not to raffle a book, it's to raffle the entire ticket, 100% free for the workshop on fading restrictive practices.
He's so excited he gets what he's doing, as long as the raffle's happening. It's amazing.
Yes, I love it.
Let's throw a book in there as well. Come on, double down now. I've got a book. I've got several books behind me we can throw.
You wanna have a book? So we have to. Let's do it. So first, let's have a book. John will select the book that we are going to send, and let's check here who is going to be the lucky person to win a book directly from John. And it's Michelle from Melbourne. Congratulations. We are going to get in touch. When you subscribe for this webinar, we have a list of all your names and cities, so we are going to get in touch.
What did they win, John?
Well, I don't know if it's a prize that they'll like or not, but it's an oldie but a goldie, Behaviour of Organisms by Skinner. I've got to be honest, I've got a couple of copies. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and let's do it one more time here now for the workshop. Let me just update here to make it work for you guys. Sometimes my wheel stop running. Let's do it again. Here's it. Let's see who is going to be the lucky person to win the free ticket for the workshop. Joanna from Melbourne too.
Oh, to Melbourne to
Oh
go,
my
Victoria.
goodness. How did it happen? That's amazing. Really cool.
We need game show music, like it's missing. I feel like, you know, we should have some sort of motivating music in the background. Congratulations, guys. Well done. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. We really deeply appreciate your spending your valuable time with us today. And thank you, John and Oliver. We're always inspired listening to you both. And thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your ideas and thoughts with us today. So keep going, keep the conversation going, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.